start,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we start off by letting you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, your experience here, occupation, such things.
Okay, I'm Chris Watts. I'm a native of Eagle Grove, born and raised there. I moved here in 1981. I was in the restaurant business for 10 years. So I ran a business for 10 years, and the last 31 years I've been in food sales. The last 28 with Reinhardt Foods out of La Crosse. I take care of the schools, restaurants, nursing homes, hospitals around North Iowa area. I'm out in the country every day on the different county roads seeing what's going on. Been active in Mason City for quite a few years behind the scenes, and a few years back I decided I wanted to get involved politically to see what kind of a difference I could make in the North Iowa area, and I chose the County Board of Supervisors on purpose versus the city. A lot of people have asked me why I haven't run for city council or for mayor, and my heart's not there. My heart's with the county, especially with my involvement with the other counties around North Iowa. I see what's going on there, and I just think we could bring some of that home here. Married, 4 kids, 1 grandkid. And all 4 of my kids, unfortunately, are out of Mason City, but they're still in the state of Iowa, which is good. So,
Well, let's get into it. I'm going to be telling you something you already know because you're always at the supervisors meetings, but you know that they have the recent discussion and vote on the hog confinement plant near Ventura.
north of Ventura, yes.
Yeah, the one that was proposed there, and they rejected it, and I think the appeal is in their
This next week.
appealing, yeah, next Tuesday with the DNR's ruling on it. Anyway, what's your feeling on that? Apparently, the application met all the state guidelines for the state matrix.
Correct.
And yet they felt compelled to vote against it. How do you feel about that? And then get into the discussion of state regulations versus local control and that sort of thing. That's where I'm kind of headed.
That's
with
fine.
this.
Well, they followed the matrix, and they met the matrix requirements. But I still feel the local board was correct in denying the application due to the wetlands within the area. I don't think enough research was done on it. So I think that what the board did was appropriate by declining that application. I do feel, though, that local control needs to be better. Our state legislators and whatnot have kind of taken a back seat on this, but it's a huge deal, not only in Cerro Gordo County, but in the rest of the state. And whether the matrix is revisited or not, the local counties should have some control over it. I mean, otherwise, what sense is there to have local government when you're being micromanaged by what the state says you have or can or cannot do? So.
No follow-up?
No, I'm good.
All right. Number 2, supervisors have taken pride in how they held the line on taxes in recent years. Are there any circumstances under which you would support a tax increase?
No. And I find the statement misleading. I've been to every door in District 3 almost 3 times now. I've met with a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of their feedback, and it's unfortunate that the rest of the sitting board doesn't hear as much as I guess I feel I have, but help me out here, Tom, again, as far as the rest of the question.
Just, is there any circumstances where you raised taxes?
Well, sorry for my little brain delay there, but it seems like it's a shell game because they say they hold the tax levy, which in all reality is true, the percentage, whatnot, that has held. But what they're not telling the voters is where they're getting the extra money, and that's by raising property tax values. And a lot of people are distraught about that in not only the city of Mason City, but in the country of Cerro Gordo County. The taxes have gone up. That's where they're getting the extra revenue. And you know, their statement is true in regards to holding the tax levy, but to me it's kind of like a shell game because we still got the money, but from a different route.
Talk a little bit about what you think the county's role is, excuse me, the county's role is in economic development and how the county's doing right now.
I actually feel strongly about that one. I think we've taken a kind of a weak approach. I think we can step it up a little bit. When I was growing up in Eagle Grove, my dad was mayor, and they had a different approach. Nothing against our economic development; they're a fine team, but I think too much is put on one individual or a small group of people versus the way I saw it growing up. In Eagle Grove, growing up, we had a large trucking industry called Trucking, which was one of the country's largest trucking industries, and my dad was mayor at the time, and my dad, the chamber director, the president of Security Bank, president of Brenton Bank, Keith Voigt from Boone Valley, Joe and Virgil Umphin from Umphin Trucking Company would go to you, Tom, and say, Tom, what could we do to bring you to Eagle Grove? And if I couldn't help you, maybe Joe or Virgil could, or the president of this bank or this bank could. It was more of a collective approach, and you know, taking the pressure off of one individual. I hate to say gang up, but more like a power of numbers. Going in with every tool that we can possibly go into to secure that new industry to come into the county. And Chad's doing a good job, but I think with a little help, and I think that's what it boils down to. There needs to be more involvement from the county, more involvement from the city, and see if we can help lure more industry to the area. I feel bad when I look at our proximity in the state, or in the region actually, because we're halfway between Minneapolis and Des Moines. We got the Avenue of the Saints, Interstate 35, 65, 18, 122, the planes, the trains, the busing. We got the resort area of Clear Lake 10 miles away, and we're stagnant. We're not growing. When I moved here in 81, I'm not for sure of the figures, but I believe it was 32,000. Now we're down to 27.5 in Mason City proper alone, and that should tell us, that should be a good indication right there that we're not doing something right. We need to change it up.
Let me go back to something else you mentioned earlier. With the North Iowa Corridor Board,
Yes.
and the various representatives they have on the board, what are they not doing compared to what you were talking about growing up in Eagle Grove? And there's a cross section of business people and representatives of the various cities and counties and so on.
More like the presentation or the follow-up. There's the planning, the implementation, and the evaluation, the old PI method from JC's, which I was involved with for many years. And I think the implementation process could be a little bit more aggressive than what we're currently doing. And it's, again, nothing against our EDC. I think they're a fine group. I just think we could be of more assistance, and I would really like to see us go after the business and grow.
Go into
Speaking,
that more, because the county and city are both players in that group already. So
correct.
What does that mean?
Well, for instance, the Prestige debacle was going on here in North Iowa. I go as far as Buffalo Center, Rake, Northwest, and I was at one of my customers one day, and the local paper was on the desk, and big front page article about the little town of Wells, Minnesota, landing Breakbush. And a lot of people aren't familiar with Breakbush, but I am, because it's a food company, and that's what I've been doing for years. Breakbush is a large chicken processor like Tyson Foods, and Breakbush landed, I believe it was like 148 jobs. The little town of Wells, Minnesota, landed Breakbush, and you know, great for Wells, Minnesota. But all I could think about while I was reading this article was, where were we? Where was Cerro Gordo County? Were we even aware that they were looking? Did we go out and invite them to the table and offer them the tour of the county, or show them one of our shovel-ready sites? And that's where I come from, I guess.
Did you ever find the answer to that?
No,
Did you ask?
not yet.
Okay.
But it's a fact though, isn't it, that there's so much that goes on that we wouldn't know about because we're not privy to all the conversations that
Right.
they may have well done that, probably to them and 100 other businesses.
Yeah, and it's very possible that we did look at, or we did contact Breakbush, but you know, it's just hard to believe that a small community, and again, nothing against the small community because I'm from one, but it's hard to believe that we didn't have the incentives there to lure that same facility here to our area.
All right. In your opinion, what are the two biggest needs in Cerro Gordo County, and how should the county proceed to accomplish them?
Windmills, wind energy, I think is one of our biggest needs, because our roads and bridges are in very, very pathetic shape. I spent since July 5th going door to door, and it's kind of weird because when I started July 5th, I was in a short sleeve and sweaty before I got home, and last night I was in a long sleeve shirt and a coat and freezing before I got home. But going to the country in particular, I took a whole week off, morning, noon, and night, and surprising enough, I probably found 80% of the people home and had many, many long conversations with them. They took me out and showed me several things in the county, whether it was culverts, drainage districts, some bridges that are in very bad shape. I've got one on my phone I'd like to share with the four of you before we're done here. Our bridges and our roads are in very tragic shape, and the farmers, you know, they kind of refer to us as city people, which we are, because when John writes an article about the county supervisors, or you know, where they put an embargo on a road or lowered the weight limit from a 12-ton to a 10-ton, in the farmer's eyes, us city people have no idea what that is. You know, and John's reporting it, but the people in Mason City don't understand the importance of the bad roads and the bridges in the country, because we're not on them. We don't travel them like they do. And there's some out there, they basically refer to it as the Board of Supervisors have been putting Band-Aids on the situation for so long that it's going to take a miracle to get things back in place. Because all they're doing is lowering the weight limits on the bridges from a 12-ton down to an 8 or a 6. And they're right. Our bridges are in very, very poor shape. John's heard several at the meetings in the past when the bridge inspectors have come in, and we've had to close several bridges down in the county. They just need help. And my solution, I guess, is, you know, the wind energy, and yes, there's something in the works, but we're years behind our neighbors. Every county around Cerro Gordo County, and I mean every county around Cerro Gordo County, is got the windmills and the wind energy and the tax revenue that's coming off of those things. They're in the TIF districts. They created TIF districts, tax increment financing. But the tax revenue that's coming off those windmills is huge, and they're using that tax revenue to fix the roads and bridges in their respective counties. and these are 4-year-old statistics, but I remember them well. Mitchell County, I believe, was 31 more miles of roads and bridges or roads that they put in 4 years ago because of funding from the windmills. Worth County to our north was 52 miles, but some of that was casino funding along with windmill funding. Winnebago County, Jim Witt, our former county engineer, I sat with him for a couple hours one day, and they had a 21 million over a 3-year project on roads and bridges. And then our neighbor to the south, Franklin County, they got 168 turbines going right now. Our governor was there 5 weeks ago now. They announced $1 billion expansion in Franklin County, and it's just huge. And when I see that, and I see 1,500 jobs in the construction phase, granted they're not long-term jobs, but they're jobs, and those 1,500 people are going to be spending money at motels, restaurants, wherever, and that's our economy here in Cerro Gordo County. That's our tax base also, and I just think we're missing the boat, and that's going to be one of my forefront issues is the wind energy. So that'll cure what I consider one of our biggest problems, and that's our infrastructure. If your infrastructure is not in place, it's going to be hard to attract new industry, therefore jobs to Cerro Gordo County.
That's one. Was there a second one you wanted to bring up? Wind energy and.
Not particularly. That is one of my big things. I'd like to see better participation with. I've got some other playful thoughts, but some regionalization of services. For instance, John and Tom, you two might remember the older gentleman that used to paint the. This is trivial, but as an example. He used to paint the curbs and paint the stripes down the streets in Mason City, and then he retired, if you remember him. Mm-hmm. And how much was his position, what was the value of his position within the city? His benefit package and his salary, what was the value of that? That I would like to know, because I can't believe that the city of Mason City, considering all the people that were in Mason City this summer and every summer since this guy has retired, that it's cheaper outsourcing it than hiring a full-time person. And the reason I say that is because the county, we do that too. We have the painting, the striping and stuff like that, and we outsource it too. So as an example, why not Mason City, Cerro Gordo County enter into a 2080 agreement and employ a person to do that stuff, and in the off season that person can plow snow for the county or city also. It's just maybe looking at other avenues that and I said Mason City, but the other communities within the county can share possibly. And one of my other big things in regards to what you asked, Tom, would be I'd like to see the Board of Supervisors take it to the road, so to say. I mentioned this 4 years ago when I talked to the board here, but having been in all these communities surrounding the area, a lot of people, and I remember it well, the Chit Chat Cafe in Thornton was one of my customers, and they're closed now, and Thursday mornings was when I called on them, and large group of people, and they didn't even know who their supervisor was anymore since Chris Naniga was there. And they had issues, and we talked about them and whatnot, and that's where my idea came out of, because a lot of these people in the smaller communities are elderly people that don't drive anymore, and even if they did drive, are they going to want to drive to Mason City for a 15-minute meeting when in most cases, they can't be on the agenda, or they can't talk because they're not on the agenda. I thought, I don't know if they would consider it a cost. I would donate my time and gas to do it. But let's say in the summer months only when the weather's good. Next week we're taking our meeting to Rockwell. Next week we're going to Thornton. Next week we're going down to Doherty. And during the summer months, try to get into one of those communities and have a local board meeting. And if not a board meeting, if that's not possible or they consider that too expensive, which you're talking gas and time, then maybe do like Jeff Marsters and Don Nelson did and have listening posts within the communities, because it's Cerro Gordo County Board of Supervisors we are not just Mason City and Clear Lake. We're Plymouth, we're Rock Falls, we're Sheffield, Swaledale, Rockwell, Doherty, Ventura also. It's not just, and I heard so much of that going to the country, talking to the farmers, that too much is given attention-wise to Mason City and Clear Lake area, and they're feeling ignored. And I wasn't just talking about the communities either, but I'm talking about the farming community also. And the farming community feels greatly ignored, and that's another one. Whether it's Cartersville elevator, going to the elevator in Cartersville, letting the farmers in the area know next week we're going to have a meeting there. Maybe sit down, listen to the farmers. Let's prioritize the roads and the bridges that are in very bad shape. Let's get a priority list going. Take it and have Mary Kelly involved with us, or maybe the bridge inspector, and sit down and formulate a plan and a time frame to get these done, and stick to that time frame and plan. And the reason I say that is because I still have in my possession at home a letter from 10 years ago from the city of Plymouth in regards to blacktopping a road going east out of Plymouth, tying into the north-south road going into Rock Falls. And the county was going to blacktop that short stretch because it's a bus route, it's a school route, especially with Central Springs going now. And 10 years later, we still haven't done it. And I think it's important. We promise, another community within our county that we're going to step up to the plate and do this. We need to follow through.
Well, here's our last formal question for you. You're running against a fellow that's been 16 years.
Phil Doherty.
Yep.
Yes.
On the board now. Let's say I'm an undecided voter on election day. Tell me why I should vote for you.
Because I'm going to get things done. That was another big concern I heard going door to door was people would call the board of supervisor's office, and they wouldn't get a response. They wouldn't get a call. I heard from 2 people in the country 3 weeks ago maybe, where they had called and talked to Phil in regards to a couple issues, and Phil has not returned his phone call. I will return phone calls. I do it every day. I probably got about 15 messages so far today left on my phone, but I answer them all on a daily basis, and I try and sit in front of my email every night and finish before I go to bed. I try and stay on top of things, and that's just something my job taught me. Because I work on a time frame every day. I have cutoffs every day, and some of these issues are timely and important to the constituents in Cerro Gordo County. And I think as an elected official, they elected me. I'm responsible to them, and I'll treat them just like I do my customers with Reinhardt Foods.
Is that you say that people are calling the supervisors, and I assume talking about the one particular supervisor too.
Yes.
And they're not getting they're not getting responses. Excuse me. How often does that happen? Have you heard about 1 or 2 instances of that? Or
I heard several going farm to farm. I was out on the roads. I took the week off, the week of the flood, and that's another issue. The week of the flood, I was out there on Wednesdays, and the rain started Wednesday night. I was on clay banks. I don't know if you guys know where clay banks are, but one guy in particular said he called Phil to talk to him about coming out. He wanted to talk to him about an issue out there, and he said Phil didn't even know where clay banks was. And this came from the person out there. And it was just a sad situation all in all that week. And John, you were not able to be at the meeting the following week, but Bob was there and sat next to me, and the meeting was, and you know how I watch the clock, but the meeting was started at 10 o'clock, and at 10:05 they were adjourned, and I walked out the courthouse with Bob, and you know, Bob's usually there only if there's something big, you know, and I looked at Bob and I says, why were you here today? And he looked at me, rolled his eyes, and he says, after last week's flooding, he says, I thought there'd be something on the roads and bridges. And he was right. I mean, it was a short and sweet deal. They approved last week's meeting minutes, they approved today's agenda, they approved the auditor's a report, so to say. They abated a $74 tax abatement on a trailer they moved, and Phil motioned to adjourn. Jay seconded, and they were out of there 5 minutes. And we just had major flooding, major road and bridge problems in the county, and culverts the previous week, and it was bad. I was out. I called Mary Kelly on Thursday. I was out on North Yarrow between Mason City and North Springs, and then I forget 290th, and I was heading south on Yarrow, and the water was 3 feet deep or better coming across Yarrow. And I called the county engineer's office, and Mary answered, and informed her of the problem, and she asked me how long ago I was there, and I said 10 minutes, and she said, okay, bye, and she hung up. And I was kind of going east and west on my gravel roads that day, and I was down later in the day on the other side of Clay Banks, which was for the most part closed because of flooding, and there was one house I wanted to get to, so I came back up this road, and there was probably 18 inches of water going over that. This was at 4:38 that Thursday, and I called the engineer's office. I let it ring 12 times, and nobody answered. There was no message. In case of emergency, call this number, that number, and that kind of disturbed me too. I mean, we had major flooding going on, major problems in the country going on, and there was nobody there to answer the phone. So I could just see some kid in the dead of night, and in the country it's dark, turn down that road and get swept off the road. And I guess not that particular location, but I guess somebody did, and I don't know if you ever knew about that or not, but one of the farmers told me about it. It wasn't a big deal, but he got swept off the road with the water. But it was a potential problem, so I thought for a moment, and I picked the phone back up, and I called the sheriff's office and reported it to the sheriff's department so they could get a hold of somebody to get out there and get that road blocked so that we didn't have a bad situation on our hands. But that whole week, you know, it was a disaster in the county, but I just think the whole week could have been a little smoother.
What week was it? Do you remember which meeting was it? Was it 2 weeks ago that?
Yeah, it was the
mention of-
Tuesday after the flood, and that was a short and sweet 5-minute meeting. But there should have been something there. There should have been a better reporting on what was going on in the country and the damage to the particular areas. And I heard it, you know, because I was out there the following week with several of them. They took me out and showed me a culvert that they had just redone. They had actually just finished it this summer, that blew, that they have to redo already. You know, and that was Mother Nature. But again, our roads and our bridges need help. Is it going to come out of the taxpayers of Cerro Gordo County's pocket? Or can we create a revenue source for that by doing the windmills like every county around us has been doing, and use that revenue source without tapping the citizens of Cerro Gordo County, and use that money to fix the roads and bridges like everybody else is doing too. 168 in Franklin County and doubling up. And look what we got.
Yeah, I think I heard you talk about that 4 years ago.
Yep.
Maybe 8 years ago.
And I haven't given up on it. I think it's a great idea. It's clean, renewable energy. I've been reading up on a lot on it, and over 10% of Iowa's energy comes from wind energy right now, and I see that growing. But not just wind energy. I think we need to look at solar energy also. That's up and coming, and other states, other communities are looking at it right now. And whether we do it or not, I don't know, but I think discussion needs to be had on it. As John very well knows, I've been going to the meetings for 8 years now. I feel I got a pretty good attendance record, and solar and wind energy really isn't a topic of discussion. It's not on the, it hasn't been on the public meeting agenda that John and I attend, and I would like to see that. I would like to see the discussion had on it. Pros and cons, where are we at? I've heard cons going door to door, well, our energy all gets shipped off to Chicago. Maybe that's true, maybe not. Maybe if they want our wind energy so bad, we come to barter on it and a certain percentage is kept here locally. But it needs to be discussed.
Aside from being a candidate, have you talked to supervisors about your concerns about solar or wind energy and solar energy?
No, and in all honesty, it's been a few years. I talked to Jay a few times, but not about that particular issue. But I asked for a sit down with Phil one day. We went in the back area of the boardroom, and I started talking, and all I could get was Phil sitting there like this, and and he would never address anything back. I mean, all I got was a nod or a yeah, and that was it. And I decided right then and there that conversation was going nowhere. And I like Phil. Phil's a great guy. He'd give you the shirt off his back. But one of the farmers taught me a new phrase down there in the southeast part of the county, and longevity equals complacency. And it's very true. And it's not just true in the local board of supervisors. It's true throughout all of our government. President can only be president 2 terms. Why is it that our legislature, our local board of supervisors, state senators, why is it they can make careers out of it? And I think fresh blood is very important. I think fresh blood is what we need to re-energize. And
So, if that's the case, if you were elected, would you, what kind of term limit would you put on yourself?
I put it right there on my website, and I brought one of these for each one of you guys if you'd like to look at it. But Phil's been there 4 so far. Jay's been there 7. I put a term limit max on myself of 3, and I would like to serve 2. If the constituents of Cyril County like what I'm doing and want to re-elect me for 3, fine. But 3 is the max, in my opinion. That's 12 years, and I think that's plenty long. I mean, we've had supervisors, we've had a history of supervisors with longevity, and fresh blood is very important.
Anything else, guys?
I'd like to add one thing, if I could.
Sure.
And I don't know if this is on there or not, but one of the biggest misconceptions, and I think it's very important to the election year all the way around, not just for me, but for all of the citizens. And I don't know if John would like to do a story on it with Ken Klein or not, but people don't know how to vote the straight party system, and I became educated on that after I lost last time. You know, I got 42.5%, and you know you need 50. So I mean, it's hand grenades and horseshoes difference. But I dug into it a little bit and found out, and I brought a copy of that. I've got a copy of the ballot from 4 years ago, and I've been walking, as I said, since July 5th, and most people, I mean literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people do not know this. But partially, one of the reasons I lost is because of the straight party vote. In District 3, which Phil and I are in, the bulk of the people are Democratic, and they vote Democrat, and a lot of people will go in and vote straight Democrat and leave. When they do that, Phil gets the vote automatically. But what they don't know, and this is according to Ken, what they don't know is if, John, if you were a Democratic voter and you believed in voting straight Democrat, but yet liked what I stand for, you can still vote straight Democrat. You can go over and put a mark by Chris Watts. Every Democrat on that ballot still gets the vote, except for Phil, because you put a mark by my name. A lot of people do not know or understand that that mark still counts, whether you vote straight party or not. And I think it would make a good story, educational piece, especially considering what's going on in our national politics right now. Because I've heard so many people say that they don't want to vote. And, you know, I think it's very important that people do go out and vote, whether they like our choices that we are left with or not.
Okay,
Perfect. Thank you.
you got it?
Thank you.